One.
Hi, I'm Lynn Coffin, and I'm here today doing another interview of a notable nonagenarian. Today my guest is Lenore Shapiro, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about her from the biography book, my little cheat sheet. She was born in Brooklyn, New York, an only child in 1931. She married a chess master in 1951, and after he joined the U.S. Air Force, they lived in Denver, Colorado, and Roswell, New Mexico. In later years, they lived in Worcester, Massachusetts, where he attended graduate school. He passed away in 1999. Lenore earned a BA degree from Brooklyn College in 1953 and a PD, a professional diploma in psychology, in 1985 at Keene University in New Jersey. She was also granted a psychologist counselor's license from the state of New Jersey. Her interest has always been centered on writing. Lenore has recently completed a young adult historical novel. In 2010, she won first place in a memoir contest in Moment magazine. Her writings have been published in the Christian Science Monitor, Yankee Magazine, educational journals, and children's magazines. She was awarded a scholarship in writing from Radcliffe College in Cambridge, Massachusetts. After 20 years, she retired from her job as a school psychologist. Previously, she had taught in elementary school. Her interests include listening to classical music, bluegrass music, folk music, and studying Bible history. She has 3 sons and is grandmother to 6 grandchildren and a great-grandchild, if I'm not mistaken. Okay, so welcome, Lenore. I'll get right in. So it mentions here your interest in writing and your teaching. So I thought we would do something a little bit different in today's interview because Lenore is, I would say, a master storyteller. She's a wonderful storyteller verbally, orally, and she's a wonderful storyteller in writing. So I thought we would begin by having her read an autobiographical story from her time of teaching. And with that said, if you don't mind.
Sure. The name of this story is Fruitcakes. I wrote it when I was, I think, a second grade teacher in Roswell, New Mexico. Okay. Friday afternoon, 3:15 p.m. Finished with the day of teaching second grade. I was returning to my apartment in Roswell, New Mexico. I passed Sonny Grosclose, my landlord, who was busy filling burlap bags with sand. "A flash flood is on the way," he warned me. "You'd better get some food before it starts to rain." I looked up at the sky. As usual, the glaring New Mexico sun made me squint. I didn't believe Sonny. It certainly wouldn't rain. Also, I had been invited to an Erev Yom Kippur dinner, which is the evening before the holiday of Yom Kippur. I had been invited for dinner that night to my friends, the Bronchiks. It is customary for Jews to eat with family and friends in the evening before Yom Kippur. It's called Erev Yom Kippur. Erev is night before in Hebrew. After Sunday, the actual Yom Kippur holiday and fast begins. The next day, on Yom Kippur Day, the Day of Atonement, we fast the entire day until nightfall. Sonny and his family lived in a house on Ray Street. His garage sat a stone's throw away in his backyard. A 16-step wooden staircase hugged the side of the garage. Sonny's truck rested in the lower level of the garage. My husband and I lived in a cozy apartment which we entered from a door to the left of the 16th step. From our living room we could see the family's clothesline and some of its more interesting garments. Sonny's son was the wrestler Gorgeous George. His shtick was wearing a negligee and a pink peignoir when he entered the arena of his wrestling matches. He was emulating the famous New York wrestler Gorgeous George. copying everything from his stage name to his bleach blonde curls. Our gorgeous George wrestled all over the Southwest, but no matter how far he traveled, he often stopped home for his mother to wash his laundry. His gauzy costume now swaying in the breeze on the clothesline. Perhaps he thought the ritual might bring him good luck. Worn out from the day with active 8-year-olds, I lay down to rest for a few minutes, but dozed off for 2 hours. I awoke to a pinging sound on the tin roof and quickly realized that Sonny's prediction had materialized. When I looked out of the window and turned my head, I saw that the first 4 steps of my staircase were covered with water, and gorgeous George's risque attire was sopping wet. I called Rose, my friend, and told her I wouldn't be able to make it for dinner. It's probably for the best. There's flooding, she predicted. There's no way I was going to join her for Erev Yom Kippur dinner. I opened my door to the refrigerator. Empty! I scolded myself. It was dinner time and I was hungry and stuck in my apartment. I turned on the radio and the newsman announced that the rain funneling down from the mountains surrounding Roswell was going to continue for another 2 days, with major flooding expected. In a real crisis, I could always call Sonny and his kind wife, who would send me some food. Sonny could use his rowboat to my staircase and throw a package up to me. He had been through many floods and always kept a rowboat handy. I was 20 years old at the time, newly married, too young according to our parents. My Air Force husband was always away on temporary duty in St. Louis. I took great pride in being able to fend for myself and prove our parents were wrong. I wouldn't bother Sonny, but what should I do? I searched all the cabinets in the kitchen. Nothing. But in a cabinet on the very top shelf, a surprise. 25 fruitcakes. All Christmas gifts for my second graders. Their mothers had baked them for me. I had never eaten fruitcake, so I assumed I wouldn't like them. But I hadn't had the heart to throw them out. World War II was not so long in the past, and my mother's admonitions to not waste food was still in my mind. Quote, "The children of Europe are starving," she would remind me. I had stored the 25 cakes until I could figure out what to do with them. It was October, but these edible doorstops were so dense with alcohol and sugar that I knew they were not at risk of molding even 10 months after receiving them. I spread all the cakes out on the table. What should I do? I particularly disliked the green and red candied fruits strewn around the cakes, but I did like the nuts. I could pick them out of the cakes and ration them every day until the waters receded. With the fasting of Yom Kippur evening, beginning at sundown, I was in a hurry. I started to eat as many nuts as I could before darkness fell, because once darkness fell, I had to fast. I woke up the next day and read the appropriate prayers, and I read the book of Jonah, which is customary to read on that day. I cracked open my library copy of Moby Dick. At the time, I was on a mission to read all the classics I had missed while in college. Before I knew it, it was dark. I had survived the fast day, and now I could eat. I ate some of the nuts, listened to the radio, and fell asleep. The next morning, I woke up hungry and ate the rest of the nuts. I skipped lunch, but by dinner time I was very hungry. I surveyed the cakes strewn across the table. Every single one had been torn apart, gouged for its precious pecans and walnuts. I tentatively tasted a piece of candied fruit. It was too sweet for me. Now I understood why Johnny Carson poked fun at fruitcakes. I could see why one would regift a fruitcake and eventually would end up with the original gifter. The cake smelled faintly of candy. Would I get drunk if I ate the fruitcake? In my upbringing, I had never eaten fruitcake, but now I had no choice. I sliced a piece and tasted it. Not bad, but I could discern the taste of alcohol. Would I become an alcoholic after eating nothing but fruitcake for a few days? As it turned out, on the third day, I heard Sonny calling me from his rowboat. "The water is getting lower," he yelled up to me. "In another day you can go out. Do you need food or anything?" "No, I'm okay," I lied. I could last another day on fruitcake if it meant preserving my independence. It was Sunday evening, and I felt a moral dilemma creeping up on me. I wanted to return to my students, but I didn't want to slosh through knee-high river overflow now on the sidewalk. The river overflow on the sidewalk would contain water creatures, dead or alive. That was from the Pecos River outlet. Especially the feared vinegaroon, who looked like a foot-long black lobster. It was rumored that his spray would cause instant death. I also didn't want to lose a day's pay. We were saving for a much-needed car. I turned on the radio and found out that schools were going to be closed on Monday due to flooding. But what about Tuesday? Should I call in sick? I would be lying, and so soon after the Day of Atonement. Unthinkable. But then the radio announcer declared that school would be closed on Tuesday as well. What a relief. However, I still had nothing to eat other than fruitcake, so I kept on eating it. On Wednesday, I could walk to school again and found out that I wouldn't lose my salary from the flood days. More importantly, my days of eating fruitcake were over. I managed to be independent without even getting tipsy. I checked in with my principal, Burr Powell, whom we all affectionately called Burr. She was seated at her desk, and we talked about the school closing on Monday and Tuesday. Quote, "I had so much time on my hands this last few days," she said, "that I got into a little baking. I made something for all my teachers, something for you too." She opened her top drawer and reached inside. What could it be? It was rectangular in shape, rather heavy, and looked like something that had been baked. It must be a fruitcake. I panicked. With a determined tug, she pulled the package out from the drawer. It landed with a thud on the desk. It was wrapped in floral paper and tied up with a ribbon. What could I say to Burr? I struggled to muster some sincerity, but whatever I could stammer out would be untrue. I didn't want to start my new year with lies, yet I also did not want to hurt Burr's feelings. "Open it up," she smiled. "I hope you like it." With trembling fingers, I peered inside. A strong whiff of citrus hit my nose. It sort of looked like a fruitcake, and yet was a fruitcake usually decorated with lemon slices on top? I pulled back the papers to fully expose the sweet gift. My famous lemon pound cake. Burr purred. "Can I cut you a slice?" And that's the end.
That's great. That's completely true story, right?
Yes, of course. Everything is true.
Yeah. So you write a lot from your life and telling incidents or anecdotes. How does an idea for a story come to you?
Well, usually something happens in the present, and that will jog the thought of that memory.
Right.
That was many years ago.
Right. So for example, I know one of your stories that's a favorite with me is about your being on the quiz show. And when did you write that?
I wrote it recently. I just finished it.
Right. And what got you started on that show? Do you remember, on that story? Some comment or...
Well, there were only, I think, 4 quiz shows that exist today. And I guess I had turned one on, the TV, and thought to myself, oh, I remember when I was on a quiz show.
So could you tell us the story of when you were on the quiz show? How that came about?
Okay, you don't want to read it.
Oh, I don't think we have a
No
copy.
time. Okay. All right, I was in my 7th month of pregnancy, and so I was on maternity leave. And I had a friend named Barbara, and she knew the director of a quiz program called Haggis Baggus.
Haggis Baggus.
Yeah.
A winning title for sure.
Well, haggis is a stew,
Right.
and with many ingredients.
Right.
And I think that the program was called that because there were many different kinds of questions on different topics. So she was on that show. And on Friday, they would have specific people with specific characteristics. So on Friday, they would have pregnant ladies. So she was on it, and she won a whole ton of baby equipment. And I thought, well, I could do that. So I asked her if she would call her friend, the director of the program, and she was happy to do it. She made an appointment for me. I went down for an interview with somebody involved with the program. It was in the NBC building in New York. And I knew that I was supposed to be very animated because people on quiz programs are excited, you know, which is really not my nature, but I faked it. And
Oh, thank you very much. Oh, I'm so glad.
yeah, oh, it was wonderful. So she interviewed me, and I guess I was animated enough. Then they gave us a written test, which was very much like an SAT test. So if you pass an SAT test, you can pass that. It was mostly common knowledge. It was not hard. So I guess I did pass it. And so she told me, we'll come back in 2 weeks. Don't wear a white blouse, because if you wear white, it'll reflect on the TV screen and you'll look washed out. So of course I went out and bought my first maternity dress, and it was not white. And when the 2 weeks passed, I came for the show, and it was in a studio in the NBC building. Excuse me. Okay, I walked into the room where they were filming us. There were 3 other very pregnant ladies and me. I was in my 7th month, so I was quite pregnant. And we were each one standing behind a mic, a different mic. And there was the Master of Ceremonies, who was very animated. He was good looking, but all these Master of Ceremonies are good looking. And as I said in the article, they were mannequin good looking. They all looked the same. And they were all very cheerful. So I don't remember all of the questions, but whatever they were, I must have gotten them correctly. Then we got to the last round. I have to remember. He asked me the name of a weapon beginning with T, the letter T. I could have said tomahawk, but it didn't come into my mind.
I couldn't think of one.
There are several that now I could think of, but I couldn't think of them. And the music is playing, you know, the typical music. And there's a man in the back. We couldn't see him, the audience couldn't see him, but I knew he was there. And he had a pile of encyclopedias. This was in the day before
Computers.
Computers.
Internet, right.
So he had a ton of encyclopedias. And when you gave him an answer, he would frantically look it up. Excuse me. So my turn came, and the master of ceremonies said, can you give us the name of a weapon beginning with T, the letter T? I couldn't think of anything. The music is going, and I see everyone, he's getting upset. The time is, finishing. I'm thinking, and then a picture flashed in front of my mind. For some odd reason, I thought of the book Moby Dick, and of the movie. And there's a scene where the whale is in the water, and the sailors are on top of it or around it with harpoons, and they're sticking the poor whale. So, thinking, and then I thought, oh, what is that called?
You didn't remember the word harpoon?
I couldn't remember harpoon. And beside harpoon, it
Doesn't
doesn't begin
start
with a T. Well, suddenly this word came into my mind, and I said, tarpoon. But I said it with great emphasis.
And animated.
Assurance,
Harpoon.
Like I really knew. So I can see the man in back of me with the encyclopedias. He's very upset because he's going through all the encyclopedias and he doesn't find a weapon beginning with the letter T. And the music is ending, and so then I said it with great assurance, tarpoon. So the master of ceremonies was happy, everybody was happy, and he said, yes, school teacher Lenore, you are right, the word is tarpoon. And then bells ring on the show, and he tells me, this is what you won. Now, in those days, this was the beginning of quiz programs, and they worked because sponsors gave their whatever they made to the program, so they had gifts to give to the contestants. They didn't have to give them cash. So then he rattled off what I had won. I won a baby carriage. It was a wooden, old-fashioned baby carriage. A baby carriage, a playpen, a dressing table, other stuff that you use with babies. I can't remember what they are.
Your supply of diapers.
Yes, it was a supply of diapers and a supply of bottles, glass bottles, which we used in those days. And
this was all delivered to your house?
Yeah, and I also, an evening gown for pregnant ladies. Now, I never used them. I never used it because I wasn't going to parties. But it went the rounds of all my friends. So everybody, it was a beautiful evening gown.
Did they wear it? Did anybody wear it?
Yeah, they wore it to their weddings or whatever.
And you're still in the process of donating clothing.
Right. So I gave it away, but I couldn't get rid of those beacon wax.
Beacon wax?
Yeah, I think they still exist.
Right.
I don't know. I couldn't get rid of it. But then I got to a point where if anyone came to see the new baby, I gave
them a bottle of beacon.
Give him a box of, it was like a can of beacon wax. So
you made. Did you ever have anybody question you, or did you?
Oh, my cousin Elaine had a little boy named Glenn, who's now deceased. He was home from school with a cold and had the TV on. And he ran to his mother, he said, Mommy, Mommy, come here, there are pregnant, no, he didn't say pregnant, he said, there are fat ladies. There are lots of fat ladies on this program, come see.
And she saw you?
She saw me. She said, oh, that's your cousin Lenore.
Did you ever confess to anybody about the tarpoon, or did you look up an encyclopedia?
I didn't look it up until recently. when I wanted to write this.
Right. And is there any weapon?
There is no weapon with the name of tarpoon. There is a tarpoon, but it's a fish.
Well, there's tarpon, Tarpon, I think.
Yeah, but this is poon.
Tarpoon. And is there a fish tarpoon?
Yeah, I believe so. I did look it up recently.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's funny. Yeah. So you sort of won all this equipment for. Did either the other women question tarpoon, or you said it with such assurance? Everybody.
I said it with such
Absolute
And
conviction.
besides, I was a school teacher.
Right. School
And
teacher Lenore.
You have to understand something about quiz shows in those days. They usually did not have professionals. They had working people, because the audience was working people.
Right.
So they would have salespeople, whatever.
Right. Right.
So he had this one. He wasn't going to alienate the world of school teachers.
Right. And
So-
nobody ever said, I looked in the dictionary. And
Nobody ever looked it up.
No.
So I learned a lesson.
Right.
If you speak with assurance,
Right.
you could say any nonsense and everyone will believe you.
Right. I had one experience on a quiz show where I was in a spelling bee and I was down to the final. There's just two of us, me and this boy, and he had missed his word. So if I got my word, I would win the competition. Right. And the word was penitentiary. And so I started spelling, and I had noticed that there was a mother in the back row, and she always was right in her reactions. If somebody made a mistake in the middle of a word, she'd go, oh. And if somebody was going along fine, she would be smiling and she wouldn't react. That there was, and she was infallible. So I went P-E-N-E, and she went, oh. And then I went T. No, that's not right. P-E-N-I-T-E-N, because I knew it was either E or I, and I knew when she made. Yeah. So I spelled the word and I won the contest. And my English teacher afterwards came up to me after he said. That was, he knew that I had taken the, and they even said, will the audience be quiet or something, but it was too late. She'd already, made her, so I won the contest on a false premise. Right. So tell me, there's another story that I love about your childhood, about walking. You were walking, was it walking to school?
Yeah. And
you had a choice. What was the choice you had between two roads?
Well, I had just moved. We lived in Brooklyn. It was after the war, and there was a big shortage of civilian housing.
Okay. And how old were you?
Like 4th or 5th grade.
Okay.
4th grade. There was a shortage because buildings were not being built during the war. All the goods went to the army and the soldiers. Got to remember this now.
I remember you said that the one road, was it to school?
Yes. Oh, I had to walk to. It was the first day. I had a cousin who was the head of the housing authority in New York City, and he said he could put us on a list to get an apartment, and he did. So we moved into what do you call it? Project. Project housing. A mistake, but my parents were not infallible. So it was the first day of school, and I walked to school. Trying to remember. I started to smell a cloying smell of dead flowers, and I saw for a couple of blocks ahead of me was a dumping ground for dead wreaths that they'd taken from cemeteries, because they would get rid of the flowers but keep the frames and reuse them. The smell was really bad, really disgusting. So, but I had to go there. The next day, I went on a parallel street, and I passed some workers working on cars in a garage. And they were yelling catcalls at me. Now I was only 11, but I was very developed. I was as tall then as I am now, and I certainly had breasts.
Right.
And I was very, very embarrassed about being big.
Right.
I didn't know that that was a good thing. At that time it was embarrassing.
Right.
And so they had yelled at me. So then I decided, well, I'm not going to. Which do I hate more? The street,
the dead flowers,
dead
or the
flowers,
catcalling?
or these guys yelling catcalls at me. So that's basically the story now.
Right, and so from then on, did you go past the dead flowers, or which did you choose, the lady or the tiger?
I went past the dead flowers.
Right.
And this was a black area. And I passed one house that was well preserved with a garden. But all the other houses were real rickety.
Right.
And I knew that black people lived in there.
But still it was better than going with the catcalls, right?
Right.
Is there any, was there anything else you wanted to say about that?
Well, my friends in school told me that the house that was so cute was Lena Horne's grandmother.
Whoa. Lena Horne was a famous singer.
Black singer.
Right.
Yeah.
So, are there stories from your childhood that you want to tell, but that you haven't? I mean, do you have a plan? Do you know what your next story is going to be?
No.
No.
Whatever reminds me of something.
And sometimes do you write stories about other things, or is it? I mean, you have such a rich life, and you tell all these wonderful stories from it. I remember only one story I can think of that I don't think was about you, but maybe about your grandmother or something, about being a child on the Russian estate or the person coming around.
Oh, okay. This was my mother. In Russia, in the old country, Jews were not allowed to live in a certain area. And but my grandfather got a job on an estate, a nobleman's estate, and they gave him a house to live in. And he was a dairyman, like Tevye.
Right.
And he would, I guess we milked, my mother and her sisters, the children all worked. They milked the cows, and then they would turn the milk into cheese and butter. And he would drive into the city, which was Minsk, drive with a horse and wagon, I mean, and sell it. So as I said, Jews were not allowed to live
Where they were living.
Yeah, I don't know if it was in the Pale or beyond the Pale. I don't remember where that came from. So one day in the wintertime, my mother and her 3-year-old sister, who was my Aunt Leah, they hear sleigh bells.
Your mother was 4 or 5, or?
Maybe she was about 6.
Okay.
Leah was her baby
3,
sister.
right.
So she heard
the sleigh bells coming.
Yeah, on the troika.
Right.
The sled. So they knew that they're not supposed to be there. So they hid in the oven. Now in those days, the ovens were not like the ovens today. They were big brick things, and people could sleep on top of it was nice and warm, so they would put a pallet on top, and they would sleep on it. So when the official came in, my mother and her little sister went into the oven.
They didn't sleep on the top. They were in the compartments.
Right, they wanted to hide from him.
Right.
So it was in the house of a peasant. They were staying with her for some reason. So the peasant woman said to them, well, David went to the city to sell whatever, and he's not going to come home. She was, trying to be helpful. He said, that's okay, I'll wait. So this was maybe in the morning, and he sat there and drank tea, drank vodka, and he was going to find him. He was going to catch this renegade Jew who was dare to live there. Well, my mother wrote a really good accounting of it. She was afraid that her little sister would die. And every few minutes she would feel her to see if she was alive. Now, by the way, my grandchildren love that story. And my granddaughter, Jordan, rewrote it.
Oh, that's so great.
And she won a prize, some sort of a prize. Yeah.
So I think that's a wonderful note to end on, that your whole family, you have this storytelling genius that's being passed on and passed down. And I want to say that for me it was a surprise when I first approached you for the idea of doing this interview. You said you'd never done an interview before, and you seemed, and even said that you were very nervous about it, and wanted and yet, you're the most natural person for this. We haven't even touched a quarter of the stories that I personally know and like that you write, and the fact that your grandchild would capture this, both the story itself and then the gift of telling it, is a wonderful tribute to it. So thank you very much for coming and sharing some of your stories.
Thank you, Lynn.
Really appreciate it.